I'm Jack Josie. Let me and some of my friends tell you about our hometown, Georgetown, Texas. Georgetown sits in the center of the state, just north of Austin, the state capital.
Georgetown is almost 150 years old
and is home to nearly 30,000 people.
It has wonderful old neighborhoods close to downtown.
Great schools for my two kids. Churches of most all denominations.
Stores you can be proud of. Lots of recreational opportunities like golf and water sports.
And it's the home of top-ranked Southwestern University.
Georgetown means different things to different people.
Mary Jane Evans' family came here before the Civil War.
To me, Georgetown represents the experiences and traditions of 4 generations of my family.
When Joanne and Martin King were ready to retire, they searched Central Texas for the perfect place.
We chose to remodel a 100-year-old home near the square and to be an active part of the community.
We walk most places we want to go and value our way of life very highly.
Lolly and Ken Ewan are newcomers and live in the suburbs.
My husband's business is in a new section of town. Our family enjoys a modern lifestyle within the setting of a historic community.
For newcomers and longtime residents alike, what sets Georgetown apart is the Courthouse Square. Harry Gold is a downtown merchant. His family opened several department stores in the county during the 1930s.
My family has always liked having a department store in a small community. We enjoy the relationship with our customers.
Dick Cervenka started working in the Williamson County Courthouse in 1935. He was county clerk from 1949 to 1979.
County government has always been a mainstay of Georgetown. I like to think of those earlier county employees who left their mark on our city.
In a very real way, the story of the square tells the story of Georgetown. On July 4th, 1848, lots for the new frontier town were sold at public auction. A lot 30 by 60 sold for less than a penny. The earliest buildings on the square were simple log structures. Even the first courthouse, sited to the east of the public common, was built of logs. School children are delighted to hear county historian Clara Scarborough describe Georgetown's earliest years.
Shops were scattered haphazardly around the square. 4 years after the town was founded, there were less than a dozen houses, 1 blacksmith shop, 1 church, 2 stores, and 2 saloons.
As soon as lumber could be locally milled or easily imported, wood frame buildings were constructed. This is Georgetown's second courthouse. With the coming of the cattle drives in the 1870s, Georgetown prospered. Sometimes as many as 5,000 head of cattle thundered past the square in a single day.
My grandfather and his 2 brothers, the Snyder brothers as everyone called them, were early cattlemen and owned extensive land. They drove their herds right past the courthouse on their way north to the main cattle trails.
Georgetown looked just like a set from an old movie. This was the south side of the square, across from the courthouse. Notice the board sidewalks and dirt streets. From the beginning, the square was at the heart of Georgetown's community life. First Monday trade days, probably the first major public event held on the square, were born of the cattle boom and gave the menfolk a chance to trade their livestock. As the little frontier town grew and prospered, handsome buildings of locally quarried limestone began to appear, like the county's next courthouse, the first to be placed at the center of the square. These stone buildings were made either of simple rubble-stone construction or of more finely crafted hand-carved blocks. Notice the chisel marks. 2 stone buildings of the 1870s still remain on the square. The Steele Macomson building, which was first a dry goods store, then a bank, then a hotel boarding house. And the Schaefer Saddlery building, where saddles and bridles were sold. 1880 through 1910 was Georgetown's golden age, when the town enjoyed its Victorian heyday as a bustling commercial and educational center, spurred on not only by the cattle boom, but also by the cotton industry. At the same time, Southwestern University opened in Georgetown. Professor Claude Kennard has been an art history teacher there.
A great many of the early businessmen were attracted to Georgetown because of the superior educational opportunities for their families.
It was the coming of the railroad in 1878 that really signaled Georgetown's golden age. The railroad made it possible to ship building materials in by the Georgetown tap line, which helped to create most of the handsome commercial buildings that we see on the square today. Merchants embellished their stores with elaborate detailing and bold color schemes. The railroad shipped iron stairways, porthole windows, oriel windows, cast iron columns, and metal cornices. Entire storefronts of pressed metal were shipped in from St. Louis to transform a plain wooden facade for less than $500. Georgetown Heritage Society volunteer Taj O'Donnell has given countless tours of the square.
Both visitors and local residents notice details on these old buildings, like the insignia on the Masonic Lodge and the faded lettering on the old steel store.
Victorian Georgetown had most every kind of merchandise the citizens could want. There were livery stables, grocery stores, and dry goods stores, like the one in the N.B. Lockett building. A dry goods merchant remodeled this building in 1896, adding an oriel window, metal cornice, and a brick facade. Rail freight had greatly increased the popularity of brick as a building material. The two CAD clamp buildings are outstanding examples of brick buildings constructed during this period. Dominating the square was an elegant Victorian courthouse, the county's fourth, designed by a prestigious Italian architect. A bird's-eye view of the city at the time shows how the courthouse, located on the left, stood out against the skyline. Fire was a constant threat in those days. Crucial protection was provided by the Hook and Ladder Company of the Volunteer Fire Department. The horse-drawn fire wagon was kept in this L-shaped building, which also housed the city's municipal offices and its calaboose. Georgetown's water supply was stored in a 100-foot-tall metal standpipe. A cast-iron bell rang the alarm whenever there was a fire. The same building continues to house the fire department today. The streets were still unpaved, and the city's sprinkler wagon substantially reduced the bothersome dust on the square. And Georgetown Square still represented more than just a collection of handsome buildings. For decades, the whole town turned out for an annual parade around the square, sponsored by the Volunteer Fire Department. Each spring, elaborate floats were gaily decorated with crepe paper flowers and ribbons. And the citizenry donned its finest apparel. Georgetown moved confidently into the 20th century. In 1900, the impressive Masonic Lodge was built, followed soon after by the Oddfellows Hall, now unfortunately demolished, and the handsome P.H. Dimmitt Building, with its beautifully detailed stone arches. In 1910, Georgetown citizens replaced the Victorian courthouse with a more formal, classical revival-style building, with beautiful detailing, both inside and out. The original classical pediments and balustrades on the exterior were later removed. Former State Bank building, built during this period, displays the same dignified classical revival elements as the courthouse. The city's businesses prospered. Everything could be found on the square, from horse collars to fresh ground coffee, to fine jewelry and books. The industrial district was at full production, and the Georgetown oil mill was kept busy processing cottonseed oil. When a Ford dealership opened downtown in 1911, Georgetown entered the age of the automobile. The speed limit was restricted to 8 miles an hour in town, but drivers of those newfangled contraptions were always running into cows on the road. Proud owners transformed their autos into whimsical shapes for the firemen's parade. How fortunate for the fire queen that year that her fiancé happened to be the local Ford dealer. In 1909, there were barely 100 autos in the county, but by 1922, 6,300 vehicles were registered at the courthouse. The Great Depression stifled the city's growth for a time. Downtown architecture changed very little. Services, however, changed with the times. The families of Bill Hoffman and Marvin Burns operated a dry goods store on the square for many years.
I remember downtown Georgetown in the 30s and 40s. The highway to Austin and Dallas went right past the Stromberg Hoffman store on the square.
There were beauty shops and furniture stores, photo studios and clothiers, those wonderful cafes, and the very popular movie houses. During World War II, war bond rallies were scheduled on the square. In the 1950s and 60s, however, downtown Georgetown, like many other small towns across the nation, began to decline. As regional shopping centers sprang up in outlying areas, local businesses suffered. Georgetown's unique collection of downtown commercial buildings began to look neglected, both inside and out. In the 1970s, however, all across America, a preservation movement began to grow. Georgetown Square was ripe for revitalization. Beginning in the 1970s, through the efforts of far-sighted local citizens, Georgetown's downward trend began to be reversed. Skip Morris remembers.
In 1975, the square was designated as Georgetown's first local historic district, and a short time later, it was named a National Register district.
One of the first structures to get a new lease on life was the steel store and Macomson building. The owners were assisted by the new federal tax incentives, which made it advantageous to refurbish downtown buildings. Then, in 1982, Georgetown was selected to participate in the Main Street project, piloted by the National Trust for Historic Preservation. Annis Reed of the Texas Historical Commission is state coordinator for this program.
Main Street is an innovative program designed to bring about the economic and architectural revitalization of towns across America.
The CAD Clamp buildings are an excellent example of what the Main Street programs have accomplished. Jack Gregoire served as Georgetown's most recent Main Street manager.
During our Main Street years, more than $8 million was reinvested in downtown building improvements. Over 70 structures underwent major renovation. A dozen more received new signage, and more than 300 new jobs were created.
Saws and hammers, ladders and scaffolding became the order of the day. Structure after structure was meticulously and beautifully restored. Through the Texas Historical Commission, the Main Street project architect prepared drawings to assure that the restoration work was correct. A historic photograph made it possible to accurately restore the H.C. Craig building on the west side of the square. The owners of the stately Masonic Lodge went to special efforts to restore it to its original form, as Esther Weir explains.
The lodge lost its original onion dome years ago. We were able to locate a firm which could duplicate the dome from drawings and pictures. It was an exciting time on the square that August morning when the new dome was lifted into place. Now the building is whole again.
In 1986, as its major project for the Texas Sesquicentennial, Georgetown and its citizens invested nearly $1.5 million in improvements to the downtown square. Brick pavers replaced the cracked sidewalks. Old-fashioned lighting standards were installed, and crepe myrtle and oak trees were planted. Commemorative pocket parks with handsome teakwood benches were placed on the four corners of the square. All these efforts resulted in a striking transformation of the square on the east side, the west, the north, and the south. The square is again very much a part of the daily life of the people of Georgetown. The wonderful old buildings are being put to new uses. An increasing number of visitors come to Georgetown to tour the square, to shop, to have lunch, explore the square for themselves, and just enjoy the change of pace from the hurried life of the big city. Nancy Raper is a volunteer for the Georgetown Heritage Society.
Together with the downtown merchants, the society works with the city and county to safeguard our historic square.
Because of its commitment to the central business district, the city constructed a new library just a few blocks from the square, which combines modern architectural design with traditional building materials. And the city's old red brick water plant was handsomely renovated to house the police department. The county fathers plan to locate the new jail and courts complex near the square to keep county government a vital part of the downtown. Georgetown's buildings and traditions provide a key to understanding its past. For nearly a century and a half, the physical appearance of the square has mirrored the changes in the economic and cultural life of the town. The square reminds us that we are a part of a community with deep roots. It's so important for our children to acquire a sense of the passage of time and of each generation's role in history. Now, just like in the old days, the square continues to be at the heart of Georgetown history. Each spring, Mayfair on the Square offers arts and crafts booths, food and entertainment. The Williamson County Sheriff's Posse holds its summer rodeo parade as it has done since the 1930s. The December Christmas stroll on the square attracts thousands. Its booths and parade involve the entire community of Georgetown and brings together the strands of Georgetown's past, its frontier heritage, the pride it's always taken in its young people, and the exuberance it feels about its future. Celebrations like these belong at the heart of a community. In Georgetown, that place is
On the Square.